Protecting your daughter is our priority. One afternoon, a sudden call from the police jolted me. Why would they be calling me? What on earth happened? As I listened, shock coursed through me at their words. What do you mean? It turned out they had found my 4-year-old daughter alone and had taken her into their care. But she was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Little did I know, this call would mark a significant turning point in our lives. I'm Karen, 30 years old, juggling work from home while raising my daughter. 5 years ago, I married my college classmate Andrew, and together we have a 4-year-old daughter named Jennifer. My husband is incredibly hands-on with childcare, often taking our daughter out on his days off. He's also on the cusp of a big promotion, so life has been quite rosy for us, thanks to him and our delightful daughter. That was until I received that fateful call. Today, we're going to the amusement park, Jennifer had exclaimed with excitement that Saturday. My husband, off work, had taken her, though I was meant to join. A last-minute work task foiled my plans. We're off. Have a great time, I called after them, watching as they held hands and headed to the car. All right, time to nail work today. It's going to be a good day, I murmured to myself as I retreated to my home office. 2 hours later, as I was about to take a short break, I noticed my phone ringing. Since it was lunchtime, I'd assumed it was my husband. However, the caller ID displayed an unknown number, leaving me on edge. Answering cautiously, I was greeted by the police, informing me they had found my daughter alone. But there was no way she'd be alone. She was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Initially, I thought it was a prank. I decided to double-check with my husband. Hello, there's something I'd like to ask you, I began. What's up? He replied casually. Where are you and Jennifer right now? I inquired, my concern growing. We're at the amusement park, my husband answered, still nonchalant. My heart raced as I struggled to process his words. The police just called me, saying they found Jennifer. What's going on? What? Well, she's laughing next to me, he replied, sounding slightly unsettled. As long as you're together, that's fine, I said, trying to reassure myself. Can you put Jennifer on? No, she says she's too embarrassed, my husband responded. But she loves playing phone games and calling us when we're out. There's no way she'd be embarrassed, I countered, feeling my trust in my husband waver. Are you sure? It sounds like something Jennifer would do. Look, maybe Jennifer is tired too. Can we drop it now? My husband's eagerness to end the conversation only fueled my suspicion. Suddenly, I noticed something off. Wait, it's unusually quiet. There's no sound of laughter or amusement park rides in the background. I pointed out, my apprehension deepening. He claims they're at the amusement park, but could that be true? I'll see you at home then, I said, unable to shake the feeling of unease. With that, he hung up. As I pondered my husband's odd behavior and the unsettling silence, a nagging sense that something wasn't right consumed me. I realized I hadn't checked the GPS on my daughter's phone amidst the chaos of the police call. But it shows they're at the amusement park, I murmured to myself, surprised by the confirmation. The GPS confirmed they were indeed where they were supposed to be. However, the call from the police still left me uneasy. Worried yet suspicious, I decided to head to the amusement park. When I arrived at the Lost and Found Center, there she was, my daughter, chatting happily with a police officer. But as soon as she spotted me, tears streamed down her face. Dad said he'd wait for me on a bench and that I could go on any ride I wanted. I was playing, and then when I looked around, he was nowhere to be found, she sobbed. Concern gnawed at me as I listened to her story. I asked the staff for details. They had found my daughter wandering alone in the park. Despite several announcements calling for her guardians, no one showed up, prompting them to contact the police. Thankfully, she had a tag with her address and my contact details, allowing them to reach me quickly. Where could he be? What's he doing? My husband wasn't the type to abandon our 4-year-old daughter like this. Could he be in some sort of trouble? I shook off the unsettling thoughts as I focused on comforting my daughter. Mom, I took lots of pictures, she said, handing me her toy camera, a special gift from her grandfather. Even though it's just a toy, it can take real photos. Curious, I turned it on and scrolled through the pictures. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered under my breath as I came across a photo of my husband hugging an unfamiliar woman. My heart sank as more similar photos appeared, making me feel sick to my stomach. Jennifer, who is this woman? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She's a friend of Dad's, Jennifer replied innocently, but her words felt like a punch to the gut. Dark memories flooded back. My husband had cheated on me once before, 5 years ago when I was pregnant. We had reconciled then because of our impending child, but now he was doing it again, and using our daughter to cover it up. He probably left her here to be with his mistress. "Do you know where Dad went, Jennifer?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes as she recounted how he had forcefully pushed her away earlier, telling her she was big enough to play by herself. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this, sweetie," I whispered, taking her hand as we headed home. Late that night, my husband rushed through the door, looking panicked. "Where have you been, and what have you been doing?" I demanded, my anger barely contained. He picked up on the tension in my voice, looking tense himself. Actually, Jennifer went missing," he stammered. "You said she was fine on the phone. Why did you lie?" I pressed. "I didn't lie," he insisted, but his words rang hollow in the air. "I never imagined it would take this long to find her. It's been over 6 hours since that phone call. He's probably been out with his mistress all this time. It's clear he's lying." "Don't you think it's odd you didn't notice the park announcement?" I confronted him. "How do you know about that?" he asked, looking uncomfortable. "The police called me when I went to pick up Jennifer at the amusement park. The staff told me," I replied, watching his silence confirm my suspicions. "He wasn't there, leaving our daughter stranded at an amusement park to be with his mistress. It's unforgivable." "I've made up my mind to get back at him," I declared firmly. "Fine, just don't do it again," he said, visibly relieved. "Okay," I replied, deciding to let him think he's off the hook for now. Meanwhile, I've been up to something. A month later, I found myself in Los Angeles, not for vacation or work, but to catch my husband red-handed with his mistress. "Having a good time on your trip with your mistress?" I confronted them as they walked hand in hand. They both turned around, their faces filled with shock. "You can't talk your way out of this, Karen. What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip today?" he stuttered. "That's not it. She's a colleague from work," he tried to explain. "Oh, really? I called your office. They confirmed you took the day off?" I countered, watching him grow increasingly rattled, his eyes darting around as if seeking a way out of his own lie. "How did you even find out I was here?" he finally asked. "Remember the GPS on Jennifer's phone? I put it in your car," I replied, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and betrayal. I showed him my phone screen, displaying the location of a car parked nearby. Using a hidden camera is so underhanded. Who's the underhanded one here? "The only reason you'd be worried is if you had something to hide," I accused, my frustration evident. "Or is this you finally admitting it?" I continued, my voice trembling with anger. "That's not it," he retorted, his fury palpable. "He cheats and yet blames me," I thought, rendered momentarily speechless by his audacity. "Do you even have proof that I cheated?" he challenged, his tone dripping with disdain. "Well, about that," I trailed off before shoving a photo in his face. "What is this? Look familiar?" I demanded, my voice rising. "This is from when we went to the amusement park. But how do you have this picture? You were supposed to be working," he sputtered, his disbelief evident. "Jennifer took it. Toy camera actually works, you know," I replied, my frustration mounting. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, his expression shifting from disbelief to denial. "This isn't even me," he insisted, attempting to dismiss the evidence. To counter his attempt to weasel out, I handed him a large number of photos. There were so many of them that they seemed to overflow from his hands. "I'll admit the toy camera doesn't take the clearest photos, so I took these myself to make sure," I explained, watching his face pale as he saw the photos clearly showing him with his lover. "How could you be all lovey-dovey with her right in front of our daughter? You're despicable," I accused, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and betrayal. In a desperate attempt to erase the evidence, he began tearing up the photos. But I had anticipated his move. "Too bad these are all copies," I declared triumphantly, watching his face fall as the realization sank in. "I've got the original stored safely," I declared, my anger palpable as I glared at him. He looked defeated, but I decided to deal another blow. "You've got a big promotion coming up at work, don't you?" I asked pointedly. "What's your point?" he replied, his voice strained. "How do you think spreading these photos would affect that?" I pressed. His face gradually turned paler as he realized the implications. His company values character when considering promotions. If word got out about the affair, It could ruin his chances. Please don't do this. Do you really think I'll forgive you now? I've been a good husband all this time, haven't I? He pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. A good husband wouldn't leave his daughter at an amusement park, I retorted loudly, watching him visibly shrink back. But I've been taking our daughter out every week lately, haven't I? He countered weakly. That was just to keep me off your scent about your affair, wasn't it? I shot back, my voice dripping with accusation. I'm really sorry. Just please don't tell my work, he begged, his almost tearful face failing to elicit any sympathy from me. Do you remember when you cheated on me 5 years ago while I was pregnant? I continued, watching his face tense and sweat form on his forehead. I haven't forgotten the agreement we signed. His eyes widened in realization. No, this isn't what it looks like. It's not an affair, he stammered, but his words fell flat. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice cold and unyielding. He fell silent, starting to cry, pathetic. Then go ahead and sign this, I said, thrusting divorce papers towards him. No, I don't want to break up. Who will take care of things at home if you're gone? He protested weakly. Staying together now is impossible, I stated firmly. I promise no more affairs, he screamed, his eyes bloodshot with tears, but his words didn't reach my heart. I'm not angry about the affair anymore, I replied calmly. What, so you're forgiving me? He asked hopefully. No, I replied firmly. What I'm angry about is you putting our daughter in danger. My husband fell silent, tears streaming down his face. And another thing, I continued, my voice steady, you don't have a place in anyone's life anymore. What do you mean? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. While you were gone, I told your parents, your coworkers, and everyone in your usual hangouts about what you've done. Everyone knows now, I explained. Hearing this, my husband buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed with despair. I don't even want to see your face, so make sure you fill this out, I said, handing him divorce papers. My husband looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and snot, resembling a child. I left him there and walked away. A month later, the news reached his company, and they revoked his promotion because of the agreement we had. He had to give up his assets with an additional $220,000 in damages and $400 a month in child support. He's barely making ends meet now, having to change jobs to a company with a terrible work environment just to earn a higher salary. He's working nonstop. Meanwhile, I've moved back to my parents' home with our daughter, doing my best as a single mom. Next year, my daughter will start preschool, and I'm looking forward to seeing her grow anew. Mom chose my toxic stepsister over me and kicked me out, but years later, I'm engaged and his company dropped her husband's contract as a client, and now she's blaming me. I'm a 26-year-old woman engaged to my fiancé, Jeff, who's also 26. We met on a dating app 4 years ago and have been together ever since. Jeff is my soulmate, the one person who has never disappointed me. My life hasn't been easy. My parents split up when I was only 2 years old, and my dad never really bothered with me afterward. While he did pay child support, he never showed much interest in being a part of my life. My mom, who's 48, wasn't exactly a great mom either. She was more focused on her own interests than on raising me. I basically grew up with nannies and babysitters. When I got older, I realized my mom was more into her social life than being a parent. She was a freelance artist and made enough money, thanks to child support, to not worry about me much. Honestly, I think if it wasn't for the money, she would have kicked me out long ago. She never seemed attached to me and mostly just waited for me to grow up and leave her alone. When I was about 13, my mom started dating Matt, who was 50. He had a daughter my age named Jess. When they first came over, my mom stressed how important it was for me to behave well. It struck me because she'd never cared about that with my previous boyfriends. Normally, she just let me know guests were coming, and I'd hide in my room until they left. But this time, I sensed my mom was serious about this guy, Matt. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered about my behavior. It made me realize she wouldn't have even noticed me if she wasn't into him. When I first met Matt and Jess, they seemed nice, and the introduction went smoothly. Little did I know what was coming next. Matt started coming over more often, and it felt like they were practically moving in together. It didn't bother me much as long as they left me alone. I was fine with it. They became a regular presence, with Jess visiting occasionally as she split her time between her mom's and our place. At first, They either treated me okay or just ignored me, which suited me fine since I wasn't too fond of any of them. I didn't care much about my mom, so caring about people connected to her was hard. All I wanted was some peace and quiet, which I had for a while. Then they decided to move in together permanently. I wouldn't have minded, but my mom said I had to share my room with my stepsister now. I refused. That room was mine, always had been, and it was the only place I felt at peace. In that house, I had my own little corner, and I wasn't about to give up my freedom by sharing my room with someone I barely knew. When I told my mom I wasn't going to share, we had a huge argument. She threatened to kick me out if I didn't obey. I was only 14, but I knew my rights. I felt like I had to stand my ground because my mom wasn't exactly trustworthy. Plus, it just made sense. I knew she couldn't kick me out until I was an adult without getting in trouble. So I called her bluff and told her she couldn't do it. She was frustrated but had to give in and let me keep my room. Instead, she decided to transform the basement into Jess's room. It wasn't as nice as mine, but my mom worked hard to make it comfortable. When she was finished, it looked just as good as any other room in the house. So I didn't see why it was such a big deal. But that's when Jess started disliking me, and I think it had something to do with my mom announcing to everyone during the house tour that Jess had to live in the basement because I wasn't willing to share my room. I couldn't understand why she'd make such a public announcement. I still can't figure out why she did it. Maybe she wanted to make me feel guilty by announcing it in front of Jess. But it just made me uncomfortable. Or perhaps she enjoys drama and wanted Jess to know I refused to share my room, which caused tension between us because Jess didn't seem like the type to let things slide. My mom's prediction was right. Jess didn't let it go, and from that day on, she treated me like the enemy. Even though she spent half a month with her mom, the days she was with us were unbearable. She was constantly mean to me and made hurtful remarks right to my face. Let me paint a picture of the things she would say. Once, she suggested that my dad left my mom because of me, and then she laughed as if it were a joke. She'd also poke fun at my looks, especially because I was a bit chubby back then. At school, she had a group of mean girls, and she never missed a chance to join in on bullying me with them. Before, she and her friends would just ignore me, and I preferred that. We were never friends, but that was better than being enemies. What hurt the most was that I hadn't even done anything to her. She was just upset that I didn't want to share my room with her. It seemed like such a silly reason for her to hate me so much and make my life miserable. My room was my sanctuary, especially with a mom like mine. Who could blame me for wanting my own space? Besides, if any of them had bothered to get to know me, I might have considered sharing. But she was a stranger, and I wasn't comfortable sacrificing my privacy for her. I never complained to my mom or Matt because they knew and didn't care. They'd turn a blind eye to my struggles because I wasn't important to them. So I had to endure it and let her walk all over me. I tried to stand up for myself sometimes, but it only made things worse. Our parents would intervene, and I'd end up getting grounded because, well, they favored her. She'd cry a bit and get away with it, but I couldn't fake tears like her, and I wasn't that manipulative. So I'd be the one punished while she got off easy, and I had to deal with it. Growing up there was awful, and I despised my life. When I was finally kicked out around my 18th birthday, I felt more relieved than anything else. I had endured my family's chaos for years, and it only got worse over time. Jess remained a nightmare to deal with, and our parents blindly supported her, no matter what. Over 4 years, she turned our entire high school year against me, and I was left with only a few friends who still talked to me. Everyone else despised me just because she did, and that was reason enough. It took a toll on my mental health, and I struggled in every aspect. I gained a lot of weight from binge eating, which worsened my appearance. I was overweight, battling acne, and my hair was a mess. On top of that, my grades were suffering, so not only did I look bad, but I also seemed unintelligent to everyone else. I had nothing going for me and hit rock bottom. Home life wasn't any better with Jess and my parents. My mom became increasingly unbearable, constantly comparing me to Jess, despite knowing she made my life worse. Things were bad before my mom married Matt and they moved in together, but they weren't this bad. It was disheartening that my mother didn't care about me before, but after she married Matt, things went from bad to worse. She went from being indifferent to actively making me feel terrible about myself. It felt like I was living with mean girls at home too. It was clear to me that Jess was the daughter my mother truly wanted, and I was just dealt the wrong cards. Both of them wished I'd disappear, and honestly, I wanted the same thing. My mother and Jess despised me, and Matt didn't care. With no other family besides my mother and no contact with my grandparents, I had nowhere to turn. I didn't feel right asking friends for help, so I toughed it out at home to at least have a roof over my head and food until I turned 18. But then, a couple of weeks before my birthday, something happened, and I was kicked out that same day. It was a weekend etched in my memory like it happened yesterday, one of the most traumatic and stressful days of my life. We had recently graduated, and Jess had started hanging out with a new, older crowd. She befriended someone whose brother, in his last year of college, became her boyfriend. They'd socialize with his friends, who were all older than us. I was aware of their activities but didn't dare tell my parents, fearing it would backfire. So I kept quiet about Jess drinking and likely smoking weed. I had no interest in those things. I was already struggling with weight and grades. I didn't need more trouble. But that day, I must have left my room unlocked before showering. Suddenly, I heard banging on the bathroom door, and my mother was screaming at me to come out immediately. I quickly dressed and rushed out to see what was going on. When I emerged from the shower, my mother, Matt, and Jess were waiting in my room, wearing serious expressions. My mother produced a bunch of empty beer bottles from under my bed, and even more damning, a large plastic baggie filled with what looked like grams of weed. I knew it wasn't mine, and so did Jess. But my parents didn't know that. Somehow, she must have planted it while I was away and then told my mom. They began yelling at me, accusing me of being a terrible person. It wasn't just about the alcohol and drugs. My mom also criticized me for being a disappointment and for eating all the food. She called me a waste, convinced I'd never amount to anything and would just keep living with them, wasting their money. I repeatedly tried to explain that none of it was mine, and I didn't know how it ended up in my room, but she wouldn't believe me. She got furious when I suggested Jess might have planted it to frame me. She yelled that I was always jealous of her and would never be as good at anything, which is why I was trying to shift the blame. I was in tears, but she didn't seem to care and kept yelling. Eventually, she stopped and told me I had to leave. I was baffled and asked her where I was supposed to go. She said she didn't care as long as I left because she was fed up with me. When I insisted I wasn't leaving, she threatened to call the cops and warned that at almost 18, they'd take drug charges seriously. She didn't want an addict in her house draining her resources. She said I had to fend for myself now because she was done pretending to be a happy family with someone who didn't deserve it. I begged her not to kick me out, knowing I had nowhere else to go and no money of my own. But she remained unmoved. She gave me until the end of the day to leave, or she'd call the police herself. I was stunned by her heartlessness, and even more so by the fact that neither Matt nor Jess objected. They acted like everything was normal. After a lot of tears and pleading, I reluctantly started packing my things. Between facing drug charges and living on the streets, I preferred the latter. By evening, I was finished packing. As I left the house, nobody said goodbye, and I didn't look back either. I spent a couple of hours at the park, but it got too cold, so I decided to go to a friend's place for the night, hoping they'd let me stay. I went to my best friend Amy's house and asked if I could stay for a few days. She already knew about my parents, so I didn't have to explain much. I shared the events of the day with her, and she was shocked. She suggested her parents could help if I let them. I'd always kept the way my parents treated me secret. Even from Amy's parents, unsure if anyone would believe me. I felt uncomfortable sharing such personal details of my life with others. That day, Amy insisted I tell her parents everything, and they were just as appalled as she was. They called my mother, trying to reason with her, but she was rude and unyielding. Realizing they couldn't change her mind, they did something incredibly kind. They offered to let me live with them for as long as I needed, promising their full support. They were well off, so money wasn't an issue, and Amy was willing to share her room with me because she cared about me. I spent the next few years living with them, attending community college since it was the only place I could get into with my grades. I worked and saved money to find my own place, but Amy's parents never pressured me to leave. They made sure I felt comfortable and supported. About 3 years ago, I finally saved enough to move out. I was proud of myself and deeply grateful to Amy and her parents. I couldn't have done it without them. Even on the day I moved out, Amy's parents helped me settle into my new place and assured me I was always welcome back to visit or even live with them again. It was a turning point in my life. By then, I had shed a lot of weight, improved my health, and felt much better overall. I was also earning enough to support myself and had spent a good amount of time working on myself. I decided to start dating because I eventually wanted to get married and needed to start looking. Before Jeff, I had met a few guys, but things never progressed far. When I met Jeff, everything clicked. I realized he was the one meant for me. He was funny, cute, and seemed genuinely interested in me. When we started dating, I didn't know he was wealthy or set to inherit his family's chain of restaurants. I just liked him for who he was. It was only after a few months that he shared his family background, and I learned about his future inheritance. Some might assume that learning about his wealth could alter things for me, but honestly, he remained the same person I knew all along. Knowing about his background didn't change my feelings, and I loved him just as deeply as before. After about a year of dating, we decided to move in together, and he introduced me to his family a few months prior. I got along well with everyone, and they all liked me. Everything seemed perfect, so when he proposed recently, saying yes was an easy decision. We've been engaged for 2 months now, and everything's been going wonderfully. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from Jess. We hadn't spoken in almost 8 years, and I hadn't heard from my family since I was kicked out. I was puzzled as to why she'd reach out now, especially to make amends. Enough time had passed, and neither of us seemed interested in fixing things. So when I read her email apologizing for everything and admitting she'd been awful, I was really confused. She confessed to orchestrating everything in my room because she simply loathed me for no apparent reason. It was baffling why she would confess to it years later, and I sensed something wasn't right about the situation. The timing was suspicious, especially since I had just gotten engaged, and she likely knew about it from social media or word of mouth. Given that we attended the same high school, I decided to investigate further. After some digging, I discovered that Jess's husband owned the business that supplied plastic containers for takeaway orders to Jeff's restaurants. It was relatively easy for me to gather this information by creating a fake profile and stalking her online. Her husband's bio mentioned his line of work, which aligned with what I already knew about Jeff's business plans. I immediately informed Jeff about the connection. In the past few years, I've made a conscious effort to distance myself from my old life, avoiding following any family members online and asking friends not to update me on their news. So I had no idea that Jess had gotten married until I discovered her husband's connection to our business dealings. Upon learning this, Jeff and I decided to terminate our contract with him. The costs were high, and more significantly, I couldn't bring myself to engage with Jess again, even on a professional level. Jeff also mentioned that the quality of the products from Jess's husband had deteriorated over time, and they were already considering switching suppliers. So last week, a few days after I received that email from Jess, Jeff held a meeting with her husband and ended their contract. However, Jess seems to believe that I orchestrated this to seek revenge on her. She's been accusing me of this through emails and social media posts, despite our lack of contact for almost a decade. While I might harbor some resentment, it's not the driving force behind her husband losing our contract. A few days ago, she posted on social media stating that many clients had been dropping them lately, and this was the final blow. However, she insisted that our decision was fueled solely by spite and labeled it highly unprofessional. She even tagged our Facebook page, creating quite a messy situation. While I can't deny there was a personal aspect to our decision, she also mentioned in her post that she and her husband had been losing clients consistently. While I feel somewhat remorseful, especially considering her struggles, I believe our decision was based on both personal and professional factors. I feel a bit guilty for influencing my fiancé to sever ties with my estranged stepsister's husband, Aita. Update: Jeff consulted with his dad's lawyers, who agree that our actions were justified. We've decided to pursue legal action against them, demanding the removal of their defamatory posts and pressing charges. The truth is, the products we were receiving were overpriced and subpar, so naturally, we sought better options elsewhere. It's purely coincidental that I'm married to the owner of that business. Instead of improving their services, she chose to tarnish our reputation on social media. It's absurd that I even felt sympathy for her given everything she put me through. Your support has helped me see things clearly, so thank you all for your comments and encouragement. Update 2. Jeff and his father initiated a defamation lawsuit against Jess and her husband a few days ago. We're scheduled to meet with a court-appointed mediator soon. Meanwhile, My mother has once again taken it upon herself to defend her stepdaughter. It feels like a high school drama. But thankfully, I can ignore them now without worrying about my living situation. Despite my mother's attempts to provoke me, I've chosen to block her and focus on my own life. I refuse to let their negativity affect me. I'm engaged to the man of my dreams, and I'm about to start a new chapter in my life. I have no room for them or their drama. Update 3. Quick update for you all. We won the defamation lawsuit thanks to the relentless efforts of my father-in-law's lawyers. They were able to swiftly resolve the matter, holding Jess and her husband accountable for their actions. Hopefully, this will prompt them to prioritize their business and meet their clients' expectations. With the legal battle behind us, Jeff and I can now shift our focus entirely to planning our wedding. I'm beyond excited to marry Jeff, my soulmate. I've waited so long to find someone like him, and now that I have, I'm holding on tight. My name is Luda Okojima. I'm 29 and work for a big international company. I grew up in the United States until I was 18. My dad is Japanese and my mom is white. He's the boss at the company where I work. I learned 5 languages when I was very young, thanks to tutoring. Now I'm in charge of the company's operations in Japan, all thanks to my dad's support and the education he gave me. I followed my mom's beliefs and agreed to an arranged marriage. My husband, Akinari, is 6 years older than me. Love wasn't what brought us together. As we started living together, I noticed things that bothered him. The laundry needs washing. We only talk about basic stuff because of our situation. I've been swamped with working meals this week, sorry. That's not an excuse, Han. Lots of wives work and still manage their homes. He was firm about our roles. I work hard, but living together is new to me. I was doing my best to adapt. You're just standing there drinking coffee. How does that help? Drinking coffee helps me wake up and get ready for the day. It's my routine. Mind your own business. Akinari has always been like this since we got married. Maybe he doesn't really love me. He often reminds me that I was homeschooled, so I should be good at housework. Okay, yes, I can handle the housework. You knew that from the beginning. You're so focused on yourself, even though you didn't have a proper education. This household functions because of me. Remember that. We lived in a 4-bedroom house. It was Akinari's dream to own a home, so we took out a loan and got approved. It wasn't something I cared much about, but he made it seem like a manly achievement I wouldn't understand. We never really talked much about our jobs. Education isn't everything, I said simply. Are you testing me? You're belittling my education. According to you, the husband should be the main provider, and the wife should silently follow. Plus, you have a strong accent. People can barely understand you here. We're in Japan. He criticized me for everything. I grew up in the US, so my Japanese won't sound perfect. My mom helped me with pronunciation, but I speak 5 languages. I won't sound like a native Japanese because I'm not. He didn't know this, so he assumed I was unintelligent. I'm going to do the laundry. I'm off today, and Akinari will be leaving for work soon. He's a big germaphobe and always tells me you must bleach the toilet seat after every use. He washed me closely to ensure I cleaned everything after each use. When we moved in together, I used to wear shoes indoors, which is normal in America. Are you white or Japanese? Stop being gross like everyone in America. Take off your shoes, he snapped. In my mind, I thought, I am white. Half white. He was obsessed with cleanliness, always armed with hand sanitizer wipes and disinfectant. At home, he made me feel like I was the messiest person alive. Sorry for the germs, I'd say, wiping things down daily. Honestly, it got annoying. As I loaded the washer, I thought I heard him call, so I went to see what he needed. Did you call me? He snapped back. I did, but you took forever to come. You're just testing my patience. I couldn't hear you. I was doing laundry, and the machine is loud. I explained honestly. You couldn't hear over the washer? Are you deaf? You're pathetic. That's why people without degrees never achieve anything. My husband loved reminding me of my background. I couldn't finish my degree in the US because my father changed jobs. When we moved to Japan, I had to get a degree to work. I passed the entrance exam at a community college known for failures and dropouts. My husband graduated from the University of Tokyo. Coming from America, I didn't realize how prestigious that was until after we got married. But to me, a person's value goes beyond their degree. Is it really such a big deal that I graduated from a community college? What about all the other people in Japan who did too? Do you think less of them as well? I started questioning his values. What's the problem with being a community college graduate? There are many talented people in the world, no matter where they studied. In my company, there are even some who only finished high school, and they're doing great. I don't understand why he's so focused on appearances. In Japan, education is important, but doesn't everyone deserve respect regardless of their education level? I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Oh, so you went to the University of Tokyo, right? Isn't that like the top-notch education? The University of Tokyo? Ha, it's impressive. It's almost funny because you don't even grasp how amazing it is. I'm embarrassed I married someone not as smart as me. If it wasn't for our moms knowing each other, I wouldn't have gone through with this marriage. You don't deserve someone like me. He often talks about himself and points out what I lack compared to him. He enjoys making me feel inferior. In my opinion, people like him shouldn't be the most successful at their jobs. But strangely, his education seemed enough for him to succeed, even though I couldn't relate. I said, I get it. Someone like me doesn't deserve someone as smart as you. Whatever. Just listen to me. I went to the University of Tokyo, so I'll guide you. Just don't try to do things on your own. He's got a big ego and always wants to be in charge. I can't even slightly disagree with him because he always has to have the final word. Okay, time to head to work. Akinari grabbed his suitcase, leaving his coffee half finished, and dashed out the door. I glanced at the table and started tidying up. Isn't this table clean enough? I muttered to myself. 3 hours after he left for work, I got a call. Hello? What? With a subcontractor? Got it. I'll be there ASAP. My company informed me about a mistake found in an order with one of the subcontractors I oversee. They failed to deliver the materials we needed on time for our next project, which would now be delayed. To make matters worse, the materials are coming from overseas, adding extra time and cost. It was supposed to be my day off, but work couldn't wait. When I arrived, everyone was busy, and I immediately met with a team to assess the situation. I reviewed invoices and prioritized materials for the building starting construction soon. I managed a plan for the construction to start next week, but I knew the issue wasn't resolved yet. If the additional materials didn't arrive on time, it would affect future projects too. Normally, the subcontractor would handle such issues, but this time it fell on me. After a tiring day, I finally returned home from work, expecting a relaxing day off. I collapsed into bed and quickly fell asleep. Luda? I heard my name and stirred awake. I'm sorry, I must have dozed off, I said, though I wasn't truly apologetic. Still, Akinari was quick to judge. You're so privileged. You have a day off and can't even cook dinner for your husband. Instead, you sleep. He was already starting with the criticism, even though I had just woken up. I'm sorry, I had to go to work. There was an urgent situation. I explained, but he retorted, what kind of company calls its employees on their day off? I had a tough day too, you know. He always wanted his problems to take precedence. Perhaps he couldn't handle the idea of his wife being a better employee. It might have been his ego stemming from his prestigious alma mater, the University of Tokyo. Knowing his patterns by now, I tuned him out. Wait, it's 8 o'clock. I glanced at the clock and gasped. I've been asleep for 5 hours since I got home from work. The laundry I started this morning is still in the washer, and I haven't even made dinner. Suddenly, all the tasks I needed to do hit me at once. What are you waiting for? Make dinner first, then clean the tub. After that, do the laundry and the rest of the cleaning. There was a piece of your hair on the floor. It's filthy. His anger hadn't subsided, especially since I had fallen asleep. He never lifted a finger to help around the house since we got married, and he wasn't about to start now. He dictated my tasks and strolled into the living room. I hurried out of bed, washed my face, and started cooking dinner. Just as dinner was almost ready, Akinari's phone rang. It's me. It's happening again. Just stay quiet for now. Don't say a word. If they find out, we could be sued, and I'll bear the brunt of it. Be careful, he said, then abruptly ended the call. Who was that? Work? Did you mention something about being sued? Is there something going on? I already had a sense that something was going on after overhearing his conversation, but he refused to acknowledge it. Please just relax. It's not your concern. Besides, even if there was an issue, your small mind wouldn't be able to handle it, he retorted, hitting me with an unexpected insult. I seethed with anger but focused on getting through dinner without responding. I'm heading to the office, he suddenly declared, swiftly grabbing his phone and wallet. Before I could question him, he was out the door. I noticed he'd left his suitcase behind, and a file protruded from it. What's this? As I examined the file, labeled Okadera Mountain Resort Hotel Construction Plan Details, shock shot through me. I quickly snapped a photo with my phone as evidence before carefully returning everything to its place. By the time Ekaneri returned just before midnight, I was seething. I heard him announce his arrival and head toward the living room. Welcome back, I greeted him. I need dinner first, he demanded. I simply replied, I didn't make any. What? What did you say? You didn't cook? He raised his voice. Yes, I had something more important to attend to, I retorted. You're making excuses again. How much incompetence can one tolerate? That's why I can't stand you, with your community college background. I don't even care if we get a divorce at this point, he declared, his tone deadly serious. He was a staunch believer in patriarchal control, always insisting on having his way. I finally reached my breaking point and snapped back, fine, let's get a divorce. He was taken aback by my response. Divorce? What? He asked, bewildered. I pressed on. You've been belittling me, making me feel unintelligent, but that's far from the truth. My words struck a nerve, leaving him puzzled. What do you mean? He questioned. I haven't mentioned it because I don't care about school. But I actually attended Harvard University, I revealed. Harvard? Do you even know what Harvard is? His shock was evident. Oh, didn't your mother tell you? I was born and raised in the US. I lived there until I was 18, I explained. You? What? Are you serious? Ekaneri looked pained. His ego took a hit. He had been proud of his degree from Japan's top university, but this revelation reminded him of even more prestigious institutions. You're joking. There's no way I believe that, he scoffed, growing disrespectful. Are you feeling offended? You seem to resort to inappropriate remarks when you're caught off guard. I guess the University of Tokyo isn't as prestigious as you thought, I said, surprised by my own assertiveness. My feelings aren't hurt. I just need proof. Show me the evidence, he insisted, needing tangible proof to believe my claim. So I showed him a photo from my freshman year orientation. Can you read English? The sign clearly says Harvard Unit, I pointed out. Don't mock me, I can read that, he retorted, scrutinizing the photo himself. Do you believe me now? Why did you hide this from me? If I had known, I wouldn't have married you, he remarked, his ego clearly wounded. Was it necessary to feel superior to your wife? I challenged. And no, my mom never mentioned it. And what do you mean you didn't care? It's like you weren't interested in me at all, he deflected, playing the victim. Isn't it wrong to judge people based on their education? Despite appearances, I can speak 5 languages: English, Japanese, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. How many can you speak? Being a University of Tokyo graduate, what does intelligence mean to you? What's so impressive about your alma mater? I taunted, watching him squirm. 5 languages, really? Then why did you attend that community college? It's like you did it to deceive me, and don't even try. My superiority stems from attending the University of Tokyo, he stubbornly asserted. Clearly, his alma mater held immense significance and prestige in his eyes. I pressed on, sensing his frustration. Judging people solely based on their educational background is narrow-minded. True value lies in someone's ability to excel regardless of where they studied. That's why I hold a high position in my company, I stated, watching him struggle to process my words. Until now, he had always believed himself to be superior to me. It seemed this revelation shifted his perspective. Never mind, I need to discuss something more urgent, I interjected, steering the conversation back to the main issue. While I knew it was leading towards discussing divorce plans, there was another matter I had to address first. Ekaneri was taken aback, wondering what else I had to say. Handing him the file I had found earlier, I demanded, explain what this is. Before he could respond, I continued, this is the detailed plan for the Okadera Mountain Resort Hotel construction project. I know it's a significant project you're working on. How did you? He began, but I cut him off. I saw it sticking out of your bag, so I looked. You went through my private work files? Do you realize how serious this is? If this information were to fall into the wrong hands, he started, his voice rising in alarm. What are you afraid of? Being sued by my company and having the truth exposed? Is that what would happen if this ever got into the wrong hands? I challenge. Akinari was left speechless, his eyes wide with shock. We've both been distant from each other. That document is a joint construction project agreement and contract between my company and yours. See where it says cooperating company and XS company. XS company is mine and I'm the vice president, I revealed with a smile. His mouth fell open, a bead of sweat trickling down his face. He began to panic and feigned examining the document. No, that can't be right. It must be a mistake from my assistant in the material order or something. Are you making excuses now? I didn't even mention the material order. We were investigating why we lost contact with your company and realized there was an error in the order. We plan to confirm it later, but your admission just confirmed it. I countered. He covered his mouth, perhaps trying to stop himself from saying more. It's too late now, he interjected sharply, and based on what I heard on the phone, it seems you're the one responsible for this mess. You can't even manage to place orders correctly or handle the construction schedule. It's clear that a University of Tokyo graduate doesn't live up to the hype. Or do you still believe you're so brilliant? He continued, cutting me off before I could respond. Why does my wife's company have to outshine mine? How is this even possible? This is absurd. I'm intelligent and capable because of my University of Tokyo degree. You know it, he lamented to himself. In response, I calmly stated, well, I've never considered you particularly bright. Oh, please. The sight of his expression makes me nauseous. As the vice president and head of this project, I'm halting all transactions with your company and seeking damages for this project. Additionally, I'll be filing for divorce. I informed him of the 3 actions I intended to take. Please, anything but that, my usually disrespectful husband begged, his palms pressed together. What do you mean anything but that? You mean all 3 actions. All of them. My entire life will crumble at once, he pleaded. Yes, all of them. It seems it's not just one issue now, is it? I couldn't help but chuckle at his incompetence. This time, as he watched me laugh at him, he felt a deep sense of shame. I no longer wish to be associated with such incompetence, whether as a couple or a company. It's time to let go and preserve what dignity you have left, I advised him. At that moment, he seemed to realize he had run out of options. Desperately, he clung to my leg, perhaps in a last-ditch effort to save himself. Please don't leave me. Don't leave me, the once confident man now sounded desperate, resembling a child being punished by being kicked out of his parents' home. Ignoring his pleas, I made a phone call instead. Hi, President. I'll explain the details later, but I've identified the person responsible for the project mishap. Yes, I'll ensure damages are claimed properly. Okay, bye. After hanging up, he slowly released my leg and stared at the floor. Exhausted, I decided to head to bed without a word, leaving him behind. The next morning, my husband was nowhere to be found. Before heading to work, I stopped by the courthouse to obtain divorce paperwork, which I kept in my purse. I planned to have him sign the papers after work. Upon arriving at the office, I encountered a commotion at the entrance. Akinari was amidst a group of men, engaged in a heated dispute. I'm terribly sorry, the president apologized upon seeing me approach. They've been causing a disturbance for the past 30 minutes, so I decided to call the police. Shortly after, the police arrived and intervened. Amidst the chaos, I couldn't make out what was being said. After giving them a stern warning, the police dispersed the group and they left. That evening, Akinari returned home with a defeated air about him. Without a word, he silently signed the papers I presented. Never subject yourself to such humiliation again, I admonished, but he seemed to be lost in his own world, broken and detached. Ensuring he completed all the paperwork correctly, I gathered my belongings and left without another word, opting to stay in a hotel until I found a new place. The following day, I filed the necessary paperwork to finalize the divorce. Our marriage had lacked love from the start, so I felt neither sadness nor stress over its dissolution. Life continued as usual, and 2 weeks later, I learned that my ex-husband's company had declared bankruptcy. Despite paying the damages to my company, they couldn't sustain future projects due to financial constraints. Consequently, my ex-husband, the project leader, faced legal action from the company, as my boss informed me. Ironically, my ex-husband's emphasis on education as a measure of competence had backfired. His downfall underscored the truth that academic credentials alone don't guarantee success. While Japan values higher education, once in a company, everyone is on equal footing. Success depends on resourcefulness and intentions, not just academic prowess. With this realization, I reaffirmed my belief that a person's educational background isn't paramount. Instead, dedication and determination are what truly matter. Armed with this perspective, I vowed to continue my journey with unwavering dedication, confident that success would follow.